It's time for a full KLX300 review. In this video, we ran this bike through its paces in multiple different situations. We set out with a CRF300L, a modded 300L, and the KLX300 itself. Thank you for clicking on the video and welcome to my channel. What's up guys, it's Andrew from Motorcycles Off-Road and I'm back with a new video for you. I feel great making this video. This is a KLX300 full in-depth review. We're going to go over everything and every detail I could think of. And right now it's a great time to do the review because right now this bike is $750 off for the 2025 model. And it also had a redesign about a year or two ago. So it's a great time to do a full review so you guys have all the information to make a more informed decision whether you want to buy it or not. So if you're new to my reviews, I like to break it down into chapters and we're going to go in depth into each chapter. And as well as, I think you're going to find the off-road section very interesting if you're anything like me who likes to just get out there with your buddies, go riding, enjoy nature, etc. I have taken this bike out a few times in the past, but this last time I wanted to take it out a good 8 or 9 hour riding day just so it's fresh in my mind. So first we're going to talk about specifications, which I know is not the most interesting thing. I cherry-picked some that most people are interested in, and we're going to run through that before we get into the other sections that are more important, so just bear with me. Here we go. Alright, the KLX300 is sporting a liquid-cooled 292cc counterbalanced single-cylinder engine. Its back wheel horsepower has been rated at 23.9, and its torque numbers are 15.6. The transmission is a linear 6-speed, which is nice, and it has a ground clearance of 10.8 inches or 27 centimeters. So it's pretty good for hopping over those logs. The weight is 302 pounds or 137 kilograms. The seat height is 35.2 inches or 89 centimeters. So it's not bad, it's not too tall. For a lot of people, this might be a very approachable bike. And on top of that, you could always get a seat concept seat that lowers it further or even drop the bike if you have to. So it makes it a very approachable bike. One of the downfalls that I feel, and we'll talk about this later in the video, is its fuel capacity. Its fuel capacity is only 2 gallons or 7.5 liters. And it gets a miles per gallon of 59.6 or kilometers per liter of 25, which puts it just shy of 120 miles on a full tank or 191 kilometers on a full tank. Now the MSRP is $6,199, but they're also running that promotion at $750 off, which makes this motorcycle very competitive as a price point in the market. Alright, let's move on to the off-road section. If you have any other questions or comments about the specifications, put them in the comments below and I'll try to help you out there. Off-road.
There's a log, be careful. There's another log. And another one. Watch out, there's like 3.
Okay, when it comes to off-road, I think the KLX performs really well. A couple things that I really like range from good throttle response to the highlight of the bike, and that really is its suspension. The bike feels nimble and light. Sometimes I get criticism for saying, you know, a 300-pound, 136-kilogram motorcycle feels light, but as a dual sport, it does feel light. Now, if your concern is weight, and many people do have this concern, and they compare it to, you know, high-performance motorcycles like the KTMs out there, yes, they are lighter, they feel lighter, but they're not really dual sports at the end of the day. They are street legal, but they do not really qualify as a true dual sport with short service intervals, and they are motorcycles that you wouldn't really use on commuting. So basically street legal dirt bikes. And the KLX, yes, has less performance, but is more of a multi-tool, can do multiple tasks, and is a true dual sport. So with that description in mind, I would say the KLX feels like a light dual sport and feels much lighter and more nimble than some of the other bikes that I've taken on the trail like the CRF300L Rally, the DRZ400, or especially the DR650. Now I mentioned the throttle response. The throttle response is nice, the engine spools up quickly, which helps you get out of some mud or some deep sand. If you have rode many of these bikes before, I would put it in a place in the middle of the WR250R and the CRF300L. It doesn't feel to have the low end grunt of the CRF300L, yet it spools up a bit quicker, which would be closer to the WR, but yet has a little more torque than the WR. I imagine if you uncork this tiny exhaust and add some fuel mapping, the KLX would really open up. And I mean by tiny exhaust, the can is huge, but there's only like a pinky-sized hole. It's almost comical to look at, and surely that is really restricting the airflow through this motorcycle. But onto the suspension. This comes with some caveats I must say first. So firstly, if you are a larger size, height, or even both, then nearly every bike on the market you're going to want to change the suspension. This key factor is why originally I selected the 300L to edge out the KLX, simply because the 300L had other features that I was really interested in, and with my weight at 100 kilograms or 220 pounds now, either way I would have to modify the suspension on either bike. But if you fall in the 180 pounds / 81 kilograms or less range, that is with gear by the way, I would say the suspension is really nice. The suspension specs read: front fork 43mm cartridge with 10 inches of suspension travel and 16-way adjustable compression dampening. Rear shock, a gas charged shock with 9.1 inches of travel and 20-way compression and 30-way rebound dampening adjustability. Clearly this is where the cost of the motorcycle went to when comparing it something like Honda's offering of the 300L or Yamaha's offering of the XT250. The KLX has great suspension and is the real highlight of the bike. Now once again, if your weight is a little more or you plan to pack the bike down for something like moto camping or long distance multi-day travels, you will still need some modification in this department. But if you're looking for a bike that is a true dual sport to just commute to work daily, then hit the trails on the weekend, this is one of the bikes on the market that's up to the task, and you probably will never need to change the suspension at all. Though when modifying this bike, one of the first upgrades I would suggest, and not just with this bike but almost every bike on the market, if you plan to take it off-road, you might want to get tires that are fit to your purpose and the off-road terrain you have in your area. It makes a huge difference. The stock tires are the Dunlop 605, and it took one sketchy turn where I had to dab my foot to not lose it to make me lose all confidence in these stock tires. So overall, thinking about the KLX300 off-road, let's face it, most people out there, especially most of us looking into a bike like this, are looking for something to explore and see some great scenery, do some mid to casual off-road, and just have an amazing time with friends. You don't buy a bike like this for hard enduro, races, etc. So that being said, the level of off-road you're going to use this motorcycle for, it is fit to the purpose, and I think it's what a lot of people are looking for. I can also tell that there's enough bike here from beginner all the way up to intermediate where it'll keep a smile on your face and you probably won't need to upgrade for quite some time. Alright guys, I just wanted to check in and say I hope you're enjoying the video, and if you are enjoying it, I want to let you know that I've done tons of reviews like this and they're in the review playlist on my channel. And also if you're enjoying it, give me the thumbs up please, consider subscribing, and if you watch the video to the end, let me know in the comments below so I can give you one of those hearts. Back to the video. On-road experience. Okay, it's time to talk about how this bike feels on-road. If your main purpose was to use on-road, many people out there will play around with gearing to try to customize the feel to get the RPMs down at specific speeds, since this is, after all, a smaller engine. But I would say you really don't have to do that with this bike. The 14th tooth front and a 40-tooth rear combination really feels good on this bike with its power curve. Dirt Rider put the KLX on a dyno and found that it produced 23.4 horsepower at the rear wheel at 8,100 RPMs. Which is a little late at the rev range when it comes to a single cylinder off-road vehicle, but when it comes to on-road, it kind of plays in its favor. You have to think that most road riding at high speeds will be somewhere around 6,000 to 8,000 RPM range, and mostly cruising probably at an average of 6,000 RPMs. So looking at this chart here, if you cruise at 6,000 RPMs, you still have a good push to build up to overtake on the highway on your way working up to 8,000 RPMs. And eventually you'll reach the bike's top speed, which is reported to be 89 miles per hour. But this bike will do 65 miles per hour all day long with little to no difficulty. And it feels really nice that this bike has a 6-speed transmission, whereas some other offerings on the market only have 5. If we were to talk about some negatives, probably the total range and lack of upgrades for fuel tanks, but there is ways around it, and we'll talk about upgrades later in the video. Fuel ranked this bike to get 59.6 miles to a gallon, so roughly you're going to be able to travel 120 miles or 193 kilometers between fill-ups. My personal inexpensive opinion to upgrade the fuel capacity on a dual sport or a bike like this is you get a rear rack and you mount one of these extra fuel cells like I've done to my KDX when I do enduro rides, or my DR650 where we made a custom bracket and mounted the fuel cell on the inside. This is an inexpensive option, and if you guys are looking for something like this or upgrades to this bike in general, the link to my Amazon store will be below. Just click on that and the KLX upgrades and you will see it right there. Next thing to note is service intervals, which is really nice on this motorcycle, which is 7,600 miles or 12,000 kilometers. I don't have the chart in front of me, but I believe that's what it is. And that is for oil changes and valves. That was kind of surprising to me that they suggest that you have to do your valve checks on the same frequency as the oil. Now, generally you're going to change your oil once a year if you don't reach that threshold, but then I guess you would have to keep track for your valves. I honestly don't think you need to do this. I think I would do this the first big oil change, and as long as you keep your air filters clean, maybe do this every other oil change, but the factory recommends do it every single oil change at 7,600 miles, so just keep that in mind. Seems like a little overkill to me, but that's what the engineers prescribe. Next, also this bike offers a supermoto trim, which is super cool. I love this because in the market where Honda decided to make its rally, which is more of a moto camping, travel across the country bike with barely little to no upgrades, the KLX went a different way and made a supermoto, which is great for maneuvering in traffic, city riding, or just some people that like to do this type of stunts. Now you could put knobbies on the supermoto and try to take it off-road, but just keep in mind that things like logs or anything in your way without the 21-inch front might be a problem. It'd be a lot harder to hop over obstacles. But when it comes to the road, having a more stout weight displacement along with heavier rims and tires, you can just see how this bike would corner very well, be very maneuverable, and just be a pleasure to ride. Also keep in mind that if you did purchase the supermoto model, its gearing is slightly different and you actually have a higher top speed from what I've read. Next, we have to talk about comfort. After you ride for a long time, like almost any one of these dual sports, you're going to need a new seat because it's just plain uncomfortable. And also to note, at high RPMs, you get a lot of vibes from the little thumper. But for what this bike is, I found it a pleasure to ride on the road. Had no complaints at all. It's obviously not the fastest thing out there, but it felt very well suited. And as I mentioned before, this is a bike I'd be willing to ride back and forth to work every single day, enjoying the summer nights, and still throw it off-road whenever I felt the need. So if I had to make a huge judgment, put all my thoughts into one, I would have to say this bike performs really well on-road. It might be one of its stronger suits. The on-road edges out the off-road just a little bit with this bike because it's fully capable, and it's definitely more comfortable than something like a DRZ400 or a DR650 where you just have a massive amount of torque that rip through off-road, but is either taller or heavier in their own respects. This bike does it a bit better and is a bit more comfortable. So for all the comments that always ask me, would this bike be great for the city? And I would say absolutely. Next, before we get into my overall thoughts and upgrades, I want to just address a couple negatives. No bike is perfect, so let's get them out of the way. Number one is the foot pegs. The foot pegs on this bike have always been comically small. I mean, it's like a child's. I think my son's first bike, the PW80, had the same foot pegs. Like, they are ridiculously small and they will hurt your feet after riding for a day. You definitely need to upgrade those. The basic dash for me is still a complaint. I would like to see a gear indicator and a fuel gauge, and even if not a fuel gauge, I've seen other people report that when you start to get low fuel, like a third of the tank or lower, that the dash just flashes low fuel, which covers your tripometer, so you can't even count down how many miles you need. That's kind of ridiculous, and that needs to change. Another negative is these goofy mirrors. I don't know why they still use these mirrors. Other bikes in the market use a more sharp, streamlined looking mirror. The major problem I have with these mirrors, and with most mirrors that you get on dual sports, is they're big, they're gaudy, and they hit branches or leaves and then they start spinning around out of control as you're trying to ride. It's definitely something you're going to want to address. Next is the low bars. The bike sits a bit lower. The bars are at like a lower sweep. So if you end up being like a little bit taller than average, you may have to get bar risers and new bars because this bike won't fit you the best. And lastly, a negative is it doesn't come with an ABS option. So there's a lot of markets that just won't get this motorcycle. I wish they made an ABS option and released it to other countries. And this way more people can enjoy this motorcycle and at least have something else in the market that's competitive to drive the prices of other bikes down. All right, let's talk about my favorite things about this motorcycle. One, the brand new price. That is a big deal. If this is a permanent price upgrade, this is an amazing thing because that changes everything. Because one comparison about the CRF300L is like, yeah, the 300 has a better dash, has this, has that, maybe the transmission has a slipper clutch and it's geared a bit differently. but the KLX was also $600 more. And if you're somebody like me that has to change the suspension anyway, there's no reason to buy the KLX. But now the KLX being at sale price, it puts it very competitive on the market. And it's hard to argue that, yeah, you might not get every little intricate amenity that you want, but the bike still performs well and it's still a steal for its value. Like anytime you can pay this amount of money and you have something that's just going to save you on gas, save you on insurance, and have a good time, put smiles on your face all the time, it makes sense, and definitely when it's compared to the other offerings on the market. Next, ease to work on. This bike is easy to work on. You don't have shrouds in your way. You don't have to take apart the bike. If you want to get into wrenching on your bike, it's a great one to get because just like some of these other dual sports, as you buy upgrades, you can install them yourself and you can learn as you go exactly how your motorcycle works. Plus, the bike's been around for long enough where there's plenty of YouTube videos out there to see how to, let's say, adjust your valves, for example. So overall, that's a huge plus. Next is reliability. Bike's been out for a couple years now. The original model, I think the 250, was out since 2006, which was the exact same engine. It's just a different bore and has proven to be reliable. In fact, I have a riding buddy, Tim, who that is his bike. So you can rest assured that if you get a motorcycle like this, it's going to be true and reliable, and you're not going to have any issues. I've already went over service intervals in the road section, but that's something else to note. Not having to change your oil every, 8 hours. Like 7,000 miles is plenty. That sounds great. So that's another huge plus. Another positive is this bike is beginner friendly all the way up to intermediate, which is very nice. You can pick this motorcycle up if you're just learning to ride. You can pick it up if you want to ride with your buddies. And overall, you're not going to feel too much lacking. Yeah, it's not going to keep up with the super high performance bikes on the market, but also you're not going to have to change your oil and adjust your valves every other weekend like those guys. Aesthetics, a clean new look. Alright, so the first time I threw a leg over the KLX300, it was in a comparison video a couple years ago, comparing the bike to a CRF300L. Now, in the aesthetics section, I pointed out a couple things about the KLX I didn't like, compared to the Honda. Both bikes look fine, but if you're doing an actual comparison, you will have to break some things down, because after all, it's a comparison.
So if you look at the back here, you can see how this is two pieces, where the Honda has one molded piece, and it just looks more streamlined. The next thing I noticed was obviously the radiator shroud. Honda does a really good job of making theirs look sharp and aggressive, whereas once again the KLX has an older style. You'll also notice the two pieces on the front of the bike, whereas Honda has one complete molded piece. And I really don't like the silver rims. For some reason, that's something that just doesn't look as aesthetically pleasing. That being said,
And by the way, if you are considering these two bikes, check out that video. And I go into in-depth details side by side with these two motorcycles. But when we look at the aesthetics today, I would say it's marginally improved. And at the naked eye, you might just be like, no, the bike looks good. What are you talking about? But the gripes I had in that video, they addressed. It's crazy. It's like almost like they watched the video. So let me point them out here and I'll show you how much of a big difference it makes. Even though these are subtle, it really streamlines the motorcycle. Number one, going to the front of the bike, this multiple piece clip system on the front that holds the headlight housing, that has improved and it has changed to a single molded system, which I like a lot. Before it kind of looked like some sort of bug, but now it looks like a streamlined, modern dirt bike. And in fact, they upgraded it to an LED light as well. Next, the front radiator shroud, they streamlined it into one molded instead of two separate pieces. It's not a big deal, but it takes away that mold line in between, and it makes it cleaner when you install graphics and just an overall streamlined look. And another big one is the shroud over top of the exhaust. This was one thing I noted in my video because it looked like the DRZ, which is a dinosaur bike. Hey, if you like that, that's fine, but it's just an older style when you're introducing a new motorcycle. And here's the old DRZ comparison. You can see how it looks similar. Now they streamlined it with the green, they added it to the seat. It just flows. The bike just looks more sleek and elegant. And another big thing I mentioned is I really didn't like the silver rims. Also a thing they changed. They did a great job. And keep in mind, all these upgrades are now here and are also offering a discount on the motorcycle. So how can you complain? This is great. I know it's a little thing, the aesthetics, and it doesn't matter to everybody, but an improvement is an improvement. So if you're looking for this facelift with the LED lights and the new panels, you want to get yourself a 2023 or above. Alright, let's talk about some upgrades. And as I said before, these upgrades I will put in my Amazon store if you want to check them out. That will be in the first comment below, but I want to talk about them here to go through why I would upgrade each specific item. Firstly, we did say the foot pegs. That needs to be addressed. They're ridiculously small. I would say tires. I talked about that before. Do some research.
or maybe even ask in the comments below. Some of the guys will help you here based on your terrain, say what kind of riding you like to do, what percentage on-road and off-road, and you can get the right tires recommended for you. Hey, if you're just doing light gravel roads and driving back and forth to work, the stock tires will be fine, but anytime you're doing a little more aggressive off-road, you might want to invest into a better tire. I would definitely install hand guards. That's one of the first on a lot of these bikes. And actually, going back into that, before we do hand guards, I would say go with bars and risers, depending on your height. I'm 178 centimeters or 5'10", and it felt I was leaning over just a little bit to hold on to the controls. So I would go with a CR high bend and, you know, like an extra inch on the bars. And that makes a huge difference. Your back is more flat and you're more in a proper position to maneuver the bike. So with that being said, also I would install the hand guards in case you drop the bike, and because I'm going to take it off-road. So hand guards are great. They also offer a little bit of wind protection in the cold. Mirrors, of course. I custom made my mirrors. Well, in my state, I only have to run one. I always run a single mirror for bikes like this, but I pieced them together using a threaded ball and made my own breakaway mirrors, which are great because it was inexpensive and you can just fold them in when you go in the trail, or if they just get hit, they just bend over and nothing breaks. So they're great. Now also skid plate. The bike does come with a little bit of under protection, but it's just not enough. I feel like rocks are still going to come up. You still have the potential of busting a hole in your case. I would put an aluminum or plastic skid plate on here just for ease of mind and overall protection. And if we're going into performance mods, the bike performs pretty well for what it is. I would install electronic jet kit or EJK and a new exhaust. You don't necessarily have to get a super loud exhaust or anything like that. I'm not recommending that, but just better flow with more fuel, and this bike would really open up and you would get a bit more performance. I would expect 10 to 15%, and that could really make a difference, especially in the low torque numbers. And of course, if you're doing a lot of commutes, I would get a seat. Seat concept seats are very nice. You could even, if you're on the shorter side, you could get a 1-inch drop on the seat and still have a more comfortable seat than the stock one, which is nice. And also the fuel capacity, you really have to address that. That's a big issue. Its limitations are there, and there's not a huge aftermarket solution for this. Like there is something for the Honda counterpart, but what I would suggest doing is get a rear rack and one of these fuel cells that I had before. The bigger one that's not too expensive is 1.3 gallons, and that's more than 50% to your range. In fact, in emergency situations, you could just run the bike flat, then pour all this fuel in, then you have another 60 or 80 miles you can go. So all right, overall, who is this motorcycle for? Well, this motorcycle is great. I mean, it's not going to be somebody that drives only road and they want to keep up with street bikes, of course. But if you want to ride with your friends, if you're a beginner that wants to learn how to ride, if you're an intermediate that just wants to get out there again and not really worry about reliability, etc., this is a good motorcycle. I feel like most people will be fine with the stock suspension, and it's really good stock suspension. So overall, this is a true dual sport and can meet many different situations and many different needs for a bunch of different riders. I would have to say the bike has improved. Currently, it's decreased in MSRP. So overall, I highly recommend it. Well, this video is coming to a close, guys. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you found it informative. My goal was to give you all the information here and help you make a decision on what bike you should get, or maybe just give you some pride in the motorcycle you already have. Make sure you stay safe out there, guys. There's not a lot of us out there, so always wave to your buddies. My name is Andrew, and this is Motorcycles Off-Road. Thanks for watching, guys.